Welcome to Tailboard Talk with
Chris Rasmussen,
Craig Nelson, and Jeff Wallen. Every month we explore different topics of interest to you, our cohorts in fire and emergency services. So whether you sit back and listen, sound off on the message board, or call in live to be part of the conversation, we welcome you to join us in our mission to improve the fire service for those we serve and those we serve beside. Now coming to you live from the Great White North, this is Tailboard Talk on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Hey, welcome to Tailboard Talk for Friday, June 20th. This is Jeff.
This is Craig.
And Chris.
And it's green out here in the Great White North today. There's our weather tie-in.
There's the weather tie-in.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to have it.
It's for all the old,
sleep at night if
all the older listeners.
Typical June weather around here, right? It's
so rainy and stormy off and on, turning everything green. Hopefully, getting us a good amount of moisture to carry us through over the summer.
Yep. For those farming communities, we call them $1 million rains.
Yeah.
Get those crops popping.
Oh yeah, sure. You got to have them.
40 degrees one day, 90 degrees the next.
Yep. Jacket in the morning, tank top in the evening. Yeah. That's for sure. So how you guys been?
Nice.
Been good?
Good. Yeah. I just came back from vacation up in Banff, up in Canada. And so we were west of the wildfire, so we didn't have the smoke, but we had Minnesota type weather. We literally were throwing snowballs and in t-shirts, depending on where we were at, of course, the day.
Up in Banff, yeah.
Yes, some beautiful country up there.
Yep.
Just wonderful. Back in the States now.
Craig was out and about.
Yep, up in the boundary waters in northern Minnesota, right on the, actually in Canada for a little bit of it. And doing a canoe trip, camping trip.
Well,
how much time did you spend in Canada?
This is pretty typical of who works in the fire service. I was here working. You guys might not know how that works, but
how many days a month was it?
It's one of those levels things, Guys got to go to work sometimes. Well, good.
Nice. Well, Craig, we've got some guests with us tonight.
Yeah, we have some special guests with us. We've got a very important topic. We've got MMIR, which is missing, murdered Indigenous relatives, and we kind of have been tying it into human trafficking because the two topics kind of go together, very related, separate but related. And we have two guests on to kind of further that discussion. We just had a big class in Fargo, just not too long ago, a few weeks ago, and wanting to kind of discuss that class, bring a little more attention to this topic, and talk about it with some other people that have a lot of experience with it and see what they're doing and kind of go from there. Hopefully encourage more fire personnel, fire departments to look into this topic and cover it in their own agencies.
Last year, about this time, we had our guests on for the same topic. So, if people want to go back and take a look at that podcast itself too, to get, some more information on it. So, yes. But we're happy to have these two with us today. And like I said, it's a very important topic across the whole country. And some people that we're going to visit with today have some insight, some personal situations with this topic. So I'm kind of looking forward to visiting with these two.
Yeah, our guests are Monte Frank, who we had on last year and who was part of our day up here. I'm sure we'll talk about that. And then we have Deputy Chief Jacob Dickman from the Chicago Fire Department. Hear about what they have going on down there. I'm really excited to hear about that too. Yeah. As we're launching into this and hoping to keep it an annual thing up in the Fargo-Moorhead metro area.
Right. Absolutely. Guess I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Yeah, Monty, would you like to introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for following up on this podcast here. So I will introduce myself again in my traditional Ojibwe language, which I'm a member of, which is Bozu, Awan, Inhinagaz, Monte Frank, Indigo, Malax Band of Ojibwe, and Jujiba, Chiminasing, and Da. Iwadi Tribal Emergency Management, Community Risk Reduction in Anoke and Makwaduduum. And I always say Asia AIN, which means how are you doing? In my Ojibwe language, that's our traditional greeting where we give our traditional Ojibwe name first, which is Awan, which means the fog in my traditional language. I live and work for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe for the last 35 years, and I live in the Chiminising district, which means in our Ojibwe language, people of the island with that. And I belong to the clan of Muckwa or Bear Clan, which we are the protectors in our tribal traditional Ojibwe communities or traditional healers with that. And I've really been a very humble servant to the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and focusing on over my years the firefighter, EMT, emergency manager, but also in community risk reduction. But the gist of what you're doing here for Tailboard Talk is that we had a previous Tailboard Talk, which you were very gracious to ask me to come in and share my journey as a native firefighter, EMT, and emergency manager, in the fact that not only do I do that for my career, but I'm also a native father of a missing and murdered Indigenous relative, as in my daughter Nada, who we talked about in the last show. And for your audience, my daughter was human trafficked between 14 and 16, and she was murdered at 24 in 2021, what turned out to be a murder-suicide. And it's just the worst thing any father can go through in this epidemic. And as I said, and I could not have gotten through this darkness without the support of our brothers, sisters in fire and EMS and emergency management, because there were so many who were there, who just took the reins from behind the scenes, what we do so well, and just supported me beyond measurement. And as I said before, they said, "We got you, my brother. You just take care of your family," and that got me through the process. But in our last discussion, you also made this commitment that you were going to follow up. You felt that with your large urban native population in the Fargo-Moorhead area, that this was an important subject, this nationwide epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, and that you were going to make the commitment as a metro area fire department of Fargo and Moorhead and West Fargo and other public safety agencies to provide a annual training in this, to bring this awareness to your fire departments, to your leadership, to those rank and file, firefighters, to better have them understand that when they are in the field, is that they will know what to look for. Because we do know in many of our large urban areas, we do have a large number of unsheltered population that they come in contact with or reside in your communities. And in this epidemic, I think truly fire and EMS truly do have a very important and critical role in this epidemic, because we spend more time with our patients during EMS calls, or if we're in fire runs and we're doing salvage and overhaul or looking at sheltering operations, is that we are coming into contact with possible victims of human trafficking who belong to one of the many tribes who call your area, Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo, home. And you and your firefighters might be the ones who identify and intervene and possibly save a possible victim of human trafficking. And this is where my good friend Jacob and I have come together, also with Chicago Fire, because with his EMS, because we've been good friends for many years. And just my story with him, and knowing that in Chicago, because of a policy in the 1950s called relocation, is that Chicago was a very large community for relocating many tribal people. And as of now, in my last study of this, is that Chicago, 147 different tribal communities call Chicago home. And I know Jacob will talk about that, what he's done from the point, but I'd like to just have you talk about how that day went. I mean, you made the commitment and you made this happen in Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo, and provided this initial 4-hour training. So I think it would be really good for you just to, tell our listeners and your listeners how this first event went, and how you felt afterwards, that what the training meant to your to your fire officers in all your departments.
Sure. Do you think this is a good time to do it, or should we?
Absolutely. Yep. I think it's a good time
Okay.
because you're the ones who made this commitment to do this. And just from one story, you made the commitment to follow up and provide this training to make sure that your metropolitan fire departments of Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead have the tools what they need to understand this epidemic nationwide of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives.
Sure. And so, yeah, like Monte was saying, this started roughly a year ago. It's a topic that I'd heard about, but didn't know as much about. And then made the connection with Monte. We had him on the show. He told his story. It's just a moving, powerful story that you hear it and you just can't let go of it. That especially as first responders, if there's something we can do, and he's said the word several times, but it's an epidemic. And it is crazy to me that in this day and age, we can have an epidemic of human trafficking and missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. Anyway, and so what we wanted to do is do something about that. And it starts with educating our first responders so we can possibly make a difference. And I was able to stay in contact with Monte throughout the year. And then I was able to get a hold of our North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation, a representative there that works with human trafficking, Jill Croney, and she is a valuable resource. And so it was kind of Monte and I working together. Monte brought in a lot of the Minnesota resources, and I brought in some North Dakota ones. And what we came up with was a half-day class. So it was roughly a 4-hour class with several different presenters, several different agencies that work in these areas or areas related to these topics. And then invited all of our first responders in for the class. And I think the class went very well. And my hope, or our hope, was let's do this class, but let's hopefully plan it as this is at least an annual training. And so we're going to do a class every year to keep this topic in front of our people. This time we recorded the class too. So we had the city communications team come in, they recorded the video for it. And what we were able to do in Fargo is and we've assigned that now to our personnel that weren't in attendance. So the rest of our personnel are going to be able to see that video, learn from it, because we want to make sure we get it in front of the audience. One of the problems you have with any kind of first responder agencies is shift work. And so it's not like a normal 9-to-5 workplace where you can just bring a guest speaker in and they talk and everybody gets to see it and hear it. With shift work, we have to actually record it or have somebody willing to do 3 days worth. And so we were able to record it, and I've made that video available to all the agencies that were in attendance internally. So that's an internal video for first responder agencies. But we had several guests on that told several powerful stories. And then we had some of the agencies that provide resources in. And for me personally, I'm going to give everybody else a chance to talk in just a minute here. It was very, very powerful in that I had some misconceptions about it. And the first one that comes to mind is as a first responder, your gut instinct when anybody looks like they're in trouble is to ask them, are you in trouble? Do you need help? And hearing from a person that was actually human trafficked, they're telling you no, that they don't see themselves as victims. They don't see themselves as being human trafficked. So it's the wrong question to ask. And so that's where our learning comes in, is for us to learn what questions to ask. How do you approach the situation? If you identify a situation, then how do you move forward and give this person help? And in some cases, it means you continually to ask the person, you continually ask the person if you can help them, not are they in trouble or they don't want to be seen as weak. Anyways, so I'll give everybody else a chance to talk here.
Yeah, so we had several of our members that were there at the training, and this was my first opportunity to hear the story, firsthand from Monte, and it was very impactful for me. And I think it was really eye-opening in how trafficking really works. Because I think a lot of people have an image in their mind of a truck stop and somebody going from cab to cab, maybe offering services, and that it's very consensual and it's above board, or it's or it's somehow otherwise simply organized. And so when you hear the details and you see this, it really makes you want to pay attention when you're out in the field for things that are out of the ordinary, but that you've overlooked in the past. And we don't have a success story yet of making a difference in Moorhead, but just last week, while our crews were out doing rental housing inspections, they came across a young individual that was alone in their apartment, and in that person's bedroom, they had no furnishings and were acting very standoffish and very, very closed and in a corner, and there were no other adults in that apartment, and it threw up red flags when they were doing that I think they might have just shrugged off before. They involved law enforcement to then reassemble back at the apartment building to see what the situation was. Several people from our office went out to join as well too, because their awareness was heightened to what could be going on, and we wanted to first of all provide protection for that individual and see if they did need help. And as it turns out, our law enforcement partners have had repeated contacts with the family and with this individual over the course of 1 to 2 years. And this was not a human trafficking type situation, but there were a couple other indicators that made them think, I don't think this is right. And I don't think we would have felt that there was a need or felt comfortable to intervene if there was something going on before, where now we see it as an obligation and a duty that we need to. And so I've seen a change in perception and a change in behavior based on the presentation and then the word of mouth through our department before other people have had a chance to see the video. And I think when you're making a difference in the community and you're trying to respond to people who are in need, that's why we got into this business in the first place, whether it's a fire, whether it's a medical situation or another situation where seniors or youth are vulnerable and need advocates to help.
Well, exactly. And I don't always look at it as a success when you try to do this. I think it's just, being there at the right time and you're making the right observations and realizing that, again, as fire and EMS, we deal with the most probably, patient contact, or because we deal with so many in a much longer period of time than probably many times law enforcement does. So I think, so when you hear that, we aren't looking for success stories. We're looking for being there with the right tools in your toolbox. So when they go into those homes and they know what to look for, and as you said very much, Craig, what to ask, So I think that's when we start making those right directions.
That was the other thing, is it allowed us to get in touch with some resources that we have available locally. And one of them was our Rape and Abuse Crisis Center. And so just like you said, Monty, having the right tools in the toolbox, as any first responders know, you can get thrown into any kind of situations. And a lot of times it's being able to provide the right resource. And law enforcement is not always the right resource. The emergency room is not always the right resource. And in a lot of these cases, that would be true. And so now we learned at this training that Rape and Abuse Crisis Center has somebody available 24/7. Well, that's what our crews need to know, because if you encounter these situations, again, our typical two paths might not be the right path in these situations. And so we have to have other resources available to help and find them the help that they need.
Yeah. I wasn't unable to attend the session, but I did watch the video the other day. Our shift all sat down at 1:00 in the afternoon, and then all across all our 8 stations, we got to watch the videos. I work downtown, so we do see the unhoused, and excuse me, we do run into a lot of situations down there that's not typical of the city of Fargo, but it's busier downtown and just a little different. But it was interesting to see after watching the it's actually 2-part video, and we watched both parts, and the crews sitting around the table starting to discuss things and start bringing up, hey, I think, we might have ran into this, and, those kind of situations. That was good information to know. And then I received phone calls from other shifts asking questions. So, I had them, I pointed them towards the Tailboard Talk of the first episode, and had them watch that. So I think they watched some of that, and then they started asking a lot of questions. So yeah, firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, anybody that's a first responder is out looking, when it doesn't feel right, it just doesn't feel right, and that's kind of our job. So it was a great class. I enjoyed watching it. Wish I could have been there, but it was nice to see the resource. Nice to see Monte again and spreading the message. And I think we'll be doing that on an annual basis. It's very important to us.
And that was a very good message that you put across also, because again, as I stress many times in my talk, is that truly shows your commitment and your leadership to your rank and file, that we as the 3 metro departments of Fargo-Moorhead take this epidemic seriously, and we're going to make sure that we provide as much training as we can. So when we're out in the field, we have the right eyes out there, the right questions to ask, and that's exactly what you're doing. And that is Jacob's stories also. And so I'm looking forward to when it's time to hear, Jacob, is what he has done for Chicago Fire, because again, you never know where a story will lead. And my story helped you, and my story helped Jacob. And I know, my wife always tells me many times that, that even though my daughter, has passed on, is that her story is helping others. Her story, and when I tell it, it's very hard, but it's one thing that she wanted to do is help others. And if I'm doing that role for her spirit right now, and now I have the commitment of Fargo-Moorhead in West Fargo in this epidemic. And I know Jacob will talk about Chicago Fire. Then, wherever she's at, I'm hoping she's looking down and saying, thanks, Dad. You're doing the work I wanted to do, and I can't do it.
Right. Yeah. I think last time when I was speaking to Monte, it kind of ignited a fire in us, I guess. Craig and I kind of got mad.
Yeah.
I guess is a term, to say. And what can we do? What can we do? That's what we kept saying. What can we do? What more can we do? We're going to keep asking those questions. So we'll keep doing.
Right. And I think, what you're doing in your Tailboard Talk, I'm hoping will lead to other, fire departments across whoever listens to this podcast to say, hey, we go on to a tribal nation to respond to fires and medical calls. Or we know that, if we're in a more urban setting, that if we have a large urban native population, that we have to, provide hopefully this type of training also, because, this epidemic is everywhere. But the biggest thing is understanding that, if you are on tribal land, or if you are the one's agency going onto one of the federally recognized tribes for fire and EMS, or you're in a large urban area like you are in Fargo-Moorhead, St. Paul, is like, and Jacob in Chicago, which I talk about, is just you are giving those tools to help. And when those advocates who were there in their room, besides myself, heard that, I'm pretty sure they were very proud of your commitment also, and your leadership, saying these 3 fire officers are making this commitment to make our jobs and our information as advocates to get out there and be a service and be along with them to help hostile victims.
That's to add on to that. That's one thing I would like to tell any listeners is, if you have questions about this, please reach out to myself, reach out to Monte, reach out to any of us on the show right now, and we can provide you more information. I know sometimes I'll get an email, hey, I heard this show, and they want more follow-up information. And so with this, if you would like to do something like this, please reach out to us. And that's part of what we're trying to do here, is share a little bit of our start here and what we've done so far. And just going down that path, I'll just follow up with, we've since had a post-class meeting, kind of talked about what went well, what we can improve for next year. We started looking at dates, and that was one of the things that we ran into, is that the date we picked was a little bit busy for some of our local law enforcement. And so we're changing that for next year. But again, going forward, our plan is that we're already looking at dates for next year. We're going to get those penciled in, and we like the 4-hour format. That seemed to work well for anybody thinking about it, because we had several different presenters, and it was roughly 45 minutes to an hour for each presenter, and then took a 10-15 minute break between each of them, and that format seemed to work well for us locally. But
Right.
Please reach out with any questions.
Yeah, and for all the fire listening to this podcast too, is understand that every May is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Awareness Month. So that's when, as Craig was saying about maybe doing a little earlier, is typically May is very busy with many awarenesses, marches, trainings that are out there through the month of May. And you're absolutely right, and that's why it's challenging, because many of the advocates who are in the midst of this epidemic are very busy during the month of May for that awareness month.
It's kind of a funny, ironic piece. It just like Monte said, we planned it for May very purposefully, but ironically, a lot of the agencies and entities involved are very, very busy that month, so it doesn't work. So that's one of the things we're looking at next year. Is we still want to have it in that same time frame to bring that topic more to light, but we're looking at having it just kind of right before May, so late April, because of that very purposefully. The agencies that are involved, their people are just very, very busy and made with MMIR.
Right.
But Monte, you were gracious enough to also introduce us to a friend of yours that is also doing some good work, I understand. And so how did you get to know Jacob?
Well, again, you just never know where, as we say, your moccasins will lead you. And Jacob and I met through our world of emergency management and just built a very unique friendship. And when I was out in Chicago for going to a couple of tribal FEMA things I was out there for, Jacob and I always got together, and we just talked a lot about life and what he does for Chicago Fire EMS, and just gave me tours of their amazing EMS academy, and just was so impressed by Jacob's leadership of making sure his EMS and paramedics and EMTs are the best trained for every type of scenario you can think of for all the citizens of Chicago. But realizing that, in this discussion of my daughter's story and relocation of Native populations, Jacob really took it upon himself, again, as the leader that he is, to bring this awareness to his EMS academy. And, and who would have thought that just our friendship and sharing stories would also lead to a commitment by one of the most recognized fire departments and EMS in the United States to make sure that his paramedics and EMTs have, as we say, the tools in their toolbox out there. So when they're responding to calls, is they can also have more awareness of what to look for. And I'll just give it to my good friend Jacob, because again, it's just an honor to have him on this podcast, and for just to hopefully share his story, what he's doing for the citizens of Chicago.
Well, thank you for having me, first off. And I'll go back a little bit with this topic. Quite a few years ago, it was introduced to me because I had at the time I was working in our quality assurance division for a brief period of time, and my boss introduced us to a flight attendant group out at O'Hare Airport that was putting on a training like this for flight attendants, which I want to say that was probably 2011 or 2012, so it was quite a few years ago. And I've been on their chat groups over the years just to see what new trainings they're doing and what they have out there. And it's interesting because we like to think of ourselves as first responders when it comes to trafficked individuals and missing people. They're probably as what's the word I'm looking for? They're probably see as much of it, if not more than we might within the fire and EMS, and they're very, very attuned to what they see. And for the most part, I kind of had that topic in my head, but really didn't have any, just with the types of training we do and the sheer volume of people that go through, finding topics is always somewhat difficult. Monte came and visited this year, earlier, I can't remember if it was either early this year, January, February, it might have been middle to late last year, and he told me the story of what happened with his daughter, and I promised, I said, there's no way this is not going to turn into something that we can bring out to our people. So we're actually doing two separate classes. The first one that Monte was talking about, what I actually did was we created it as a breakout session for our EMS preceptor workshops. And the reason we did that is not just because those paramedics tend to be more attuned to what they're doing, but they're also teaching brand new paramedics and EMTs from some of the local community colleges that are going to go off into their own careers. And my feeling was, if we start this as a topic early, the way we do cardiac, the way we do medical, or some of the other topics, this is something that, while it's not part of the curriculum, it's certainly something they're going to come across during their internship. And if we bring their attention to it through the preceptors, it's something that is not only going to stay within the city of Chicago, but wherever these students wind up going as paramedics and EMTs, this is something they're going to be able to take with them. And even if they don't remember everything because they get overwhelmed when they pull up on a scene and they see something, they're going to, it's something that may trigger a memory. So we created a 90-minute breakout session that we worked with our preceptors. And what I learned was I probably learned more from them, despite having developed the class, than I thought that they knew in the first place. Many times we would get feedback of runs that they were on, or after the session was over, they would come back to me and go, come to think of it, I've been on quite a few of these where there's a really good chance that there was trafficking involved, and I just never thought of it. And interestingly, when we think about trafficking, we tend to go, our mind tends to go right to sexual assault and rape. And what we're finding, a lot of what I'm finding through our people, is a lot of it is servitude or indebtedness. I had one person come out and say, it's interesting, I'm not even involving the job, but went someplace to get her nails done, and there was just a guy walking back and forth out in front of the building looking. It was just one of those things where she goes looking back at it. I'll bet a whole bunch of those employees were being trafficked, were being used as work. We've had some pretty big cases make the news for families that were brought in from other countries who were used for childcare or homeless. Or one couple wasn't allowed to leave the house. I think it was 7-8 years before they were finally caught. But I'm learning more from some of my crews, and I've actually had some of these crews. I had one member come back and tell me he actually spent a summer up on a reservation and was able to enlighten me on a lot of the background of what we were teaching, which I found very interesting. It turns out that once you open the topic, you'll be surprised to find that there's a lot of people that are very in tune to it, and those that aren't, I found they were going back in their head going, I'll bet that run I've been on, that was probably a trafficking case, and moving forward, if we're on it again, will involve our law enforcement or will involve the notification process that we need to have involved. And some of the other things I learned from this, or at least talking to some of these crews and in developing the course, was it's not, we tend to think it's runaways, it's people with some form of background where they need money quick and they fell for a trap. And we had an FBI agent come in and give a presentation where she talked about a young woman from a very affluent family who thought she was answering an ad for a modeling agency, wound up getting blackmailed enough to where her fare wasn't her leaving, it was that they were going to harm her family. And it's a lot of it is a mental a block where they're going to they're afraid they're going to harm her family, and that's really how they hold them down. And that's a lot of times why the answers to the question, do you need help? The answer is no. It's because their fear is where what's going to happen to their family and their loved ones. And it falls through all different classes and different types and parts of society. And because Chicago, we are a crossroads where drug trafficking is a big one for the same reason, and human trafficking and our drug trafficking tend to go hand in hand. And so we developed that class. We actually have a second class that we're doing now for all of our firefighter EMTs and our paramedics. That one it's an hour, and we did that on video. That we had several different participants, the one FBI agent, and then several other people put together. They did it in person, 1 hour live, and we have a platform, a training platform that we're going to put that out on and send it to everybody as an assignment. I find in person is always better. The interactions that we have, I certainly I don't do a ton of classroom teaching anymore, being the one who runs that particular lecture I gave, and I enjoyed the back and forth that we had. And I know that when some of them, I'll get a phone call or a text from a crew, hey, this is what we had, and there's certainly times when we may not know the outcome of the case, but we know they're certainly certainly making some form of a difference out there. And I believe it was after one of the first successful cases that we have, I gave Monte a text or a call, I can't remember which one it was, and let him know, I said, even if it's just this one, and for the next 3 years we don't see another, I want you to know that we had a case where I had a crew come back to me saying it was because of this training we wound up having a successful interaction with a trafficked individual.
Yeah, and it was a text message, and it was just, again, where the story leads, and knowing that our friendship with Jacob and I, and knowing that he wanted to let me know, and that's, I just value his leadership and just our friendship to say, hey, this is what happened, and I just want to let you know that. And for being what he does for the most largest metropolitan fire department, and to let me know was just it's one of those things where just walked over to my daughter's cemetery, and I told her, I said, hey, you made a difference today, my girl, you made a difference, because my good friend Jacob let me know that you made a difference to help him.
Yeah, and it's not only just happening on reservations and on big cities either. So if you're in a smaller town or a community and you might think this just doesn't apply to me, there are human trafficking cases that are occurring all across the country. And when you can become aware of some of the signs that might be happening, an intervention is just as likely in a small town as it is in other areas. It's something we all need to be aware of.
And I know, especially for you all, when in North Dakota, when the oil boom was going big time in the oil fields, and I know all across Indian country we were getting red flags because of what the oil boom was doing out in North Dakota, and it was affecting everywhere. I mean, we were getting constant red flags of warnings to be aware of what's happening with that, and even though responders were doing amazing work out in the oil fields trying to maintain the law and the peace with it and awareness with it, things were still happening. And I know, and that's the part we talk about the story, is when you're on major, as Jacob said so well, when you're on major highway divisions, as you are like in North Dakota and also with Chicago, with rail and roads and things like that, you're absolutely right. And I know our Indigenous relatives, through whatever reason, may travel to those areas or to a smaller community because they're just having whatever issue going on in their life, and that's what they do, because maybe they're just trying to get away from what was happening to them, and now they're in your small community. And just to be aware that And I think Jacob probably sees this a lot in Chicago with his staff also, is that, being an Indigenous person, as you learn during the training, it does not mean that, you probably look like I do with the dark brown complexion, and now it's more gray hair than black hair and everything else. But you see, a lot of, Native people who are, more light skinned and more light haired, but still are members of federally recognized tribes.
So I've got a question for Chief Dickman. I work in training also, and one of the things that we're working on, ironically, is bringing this to our academies. And being the fire service, we usually like to see what other people are willing to share. Is that some of your stuff? Is that something that I could potentially reach out to you and you'd be willing to share some of that at some point?
Oh, absolutely. There's very little that I have that is, it's not my material. It's just material that we put together. I will say that Monte had done a previous podcast. I don't believe it was this one, where he talks about his actual story. And I played for my groups. I played a 20-second clip from that and I said, this is not Monte the firefighter. This is Monte the father, talking about following his own daughter, trying to get her. I said, if that doesn't make it personal for us, and it got a lot of good feedback for that as well. But absolutely, I have no problem sharing info.
That would be great. Again, I look at this as a process, and so the one thing we really wanted to do is start the annual class. Now we'll keep that annual class going in our area, and that's all of our incumbents. We'll continue to cover this material, but really would like to catch all of our new personnel as they come through the academy, so they're not waiting a year to get this material, that they're getting it before they hit the streets.
Oh, absolutely.
Monte, is there, we have North Dakota BCI, and I'm guessing all state agencies have a division set forth for trafficking and those things. Is there any recommendations for other states out there that they should reach out to and gather more information?
Probably one of the resources that was created by the former Department of Interior Secretary Deborah Hagelin was she created, under the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Law Enforcement Services, the Missing and Murdered Unit, which is specifically designated to work in Indian country as investigators looking for missing and murdered, working with families and law enforcement. And they have probably one of the best websites out there for information with that, which is a BIA Missing and Murdered Unit, has so much information. And a lot of times when I'm asked for resources, that's who I direct them to, because they are the only agency that has a 24/7 contact point to report a possible case of missing or murdered with that one 24/7. They have phone numbers, they have a QR code, they have apps you can log into. But also remember, if they're under 18, there's also the National Missing and the National Missing and Exploited Children's Network, or NITMIC, which is also an amazing organization that does amazing work for trafficking or missing children under the age of 18. So usually those are the two best resources, because they're nationwide, and they're always, and both of those can be accessed 24/7.
Okay. Is it a possibility, like, say, Fargo Fire contacts a local tribe to visit about this also?
Yeah, definitely. I think you probably have many large urban areas that have a large urban Native population usually has some type of Native American center that's there serving the urban population, and it's always the first good contact to go to that
Okay.
urban center and say, hey, we want to do this. Can we have somebody from the tribal nation who maybe could come here or we can visit with also? And again, that just shows that you are wanting to learn and to reach out and to become as best way I can think of, culturally competent as you can, as the 3 metropolitan fire departments that went out there, so you understand which tribal nations are calling your Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area home. and from tribes from Minnesota or both North and South Dakota, even possibly even the First Nation from Canada, because I know you're straight down from Winnipeg also. So again, you have the uniqueness of a lot of ones, and I think the more willing you are trying to learn which Indigenous communities call home. So if you do run into a possible, like Jacob was saying, somebody needing help with that one, and you can ask, hey, what is your tribal affiliation? What tribe do you call home? And if they can give you that, then you can say, hey, we have some resources from your tribal community, or from maybe an urban health center, or urban native center for like a welcome center or a service center possibly. So what you're doing is exactly right. I mean, that's what we hope to do, is just to gain more knowledge, to see what Indigenous people do call your communities home. So if you do run into them and they need your assistance, then you can reach out to the proper tribe to see how you can build that relationship or build a connection for services. And I know for Jacob, we've been trying to have him connect with the Chicago American Indian Center. I know they're hopefully that will also happen in the row too, because they do have one there for their urban population also.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work out initially when we wanted to get the class out, only because we were on a timing. The students usually hit the streets in the summer, and so we had our workshops January, February, March, and April, and we had to get it out and ready to go, but we did include a lot of the information that we had available to us.
Right. Yeah, I know when you guys were trying to set up the class, all you did is reach out, and everyone wanted to get involved pretty fast.
Well, that's the other thing for anybody that's planning this. I really hope we've got some listeners from different fire departments around the country that are going, yep, we're going to do that. You reach out to a few local contacts, and all of a sudden it exponentially grows on you. And just for my story, it was, I called over to Fargo PD. We work with them a lot. I talk to them almost on a daily basis. And I just said, hey, do you have somebody that's working in this? Because I figured they have somebody specialized in that area. And they ended up going, who a better contact for this would be is Jill at the North Dakota BCI. And that's then between Monte and Jill, it just grew from there, because Monte had a whole bunch of contacts and Jill did. And the presentation of the class came together between those two, with all of their contacts and knowing other entities and agencies that should be involved. And that was one of the other things that I didn't talk about earlier, but we actually had some of the agencies and entities involved. They set up tables in the lobby. And so students in the class could go and visit with them, and they had handouts and references and a lot of additional information that was very beneficial. And that would be another piece that I really want to keep for the class next year, is kind of set that up. It's a mini little conference kind of deal.
Sure. Are you seeing anything, Monte, like legislative wise that's changed in the last year? I know I thought I saw some that came across North Dakota at the governor's desk, more of a data collection type thing. But
the biggest thing that we're seeing probably now is we are getting similar to what's called Amber Alert. But we're seeing states now getting passed where they're getting a tribal Pacific one, like called a red feather alert, when we have a Native person who has gone missing, and gives that a better tool for, either tribal law enforcement, tribal public safety, or, in urban areas like that. And that helps a lot, because it really shows that it's targeting only, the Native population. It isn't just a general Amber Alert. It's focusing on a possible missing Indigenous person and trying to give as much information out as possible. And that's what's similar to what the NITMIC does for our kids who are under 18, with getting those flyers out when they're missing. And I know with my own daughter, Native Story, they were just, because that's all I really had for services for her back then, and they were just amazing getting those flyers out, across nationwide with that one. And I'm pretty sure that, Jacob will probably do the same thing in Chicago, as if what he's saying is what keeps growing. I'm pretty sure there'll be resources also out there that hopefully he can, work with, and especially if time allows for him to work with the Chicago American Indian Center to build that relationship and see how they can partner up and support each other out there. Because again, for what Jacob teaches his paramedics and EMTs through that academy, the building is absolutely amazing. He's given me the tour, and my jaw just dropped open, because from what he is giving his paramedics and EMTs for such real life hands-on training, it's just top notch. And I was just honored to hear what his passion is for making sure that his medics and EMTs are the best trained for the field out there for what they're going to be serving the citizens of Chicago. But now adding this additional training, and just as Jacob was saying, having his paramedics and EMTs have that, oh, wait a minute, this could have been the situation. It means that, to me, his leadership of making sure that they have somewhere is working, especially when he sent me that message that, there was a situation with that one. And then also, back to your metropolitan, agencies also, it really, to me, it really does take the leadership to have that commitment to say, we want to make sure that our responders, when people call 911, is they have the right tools in their toolbox. So when they're on scene, providing patient care, or after a house fire, and doing all the work we do with that one, they know what to look for. And Jacob said so clearly, and so did you, is, asking those right questions. Because once you find the right words to use, and you realize that now you have an opening, and this individual is starting to share that, yes, they could be a situation where their safety is in jeopardy. And if we ask the right questions, and you find out this possibly could be, a trafficking situation, to use every tool we have to keep them safe, because we do have the situations where we do have our ambulances to keep them safe in the backup. We do have our apparatuses that we can put them into to make sure that they're away, because typically there's always a trafficker close by. And I think that's where we and the fire and EMS is unique wise, where we have apparatuses that we can put possible victims into to keep them safe until the next step can happen. And again, just to hear Jacob's story of what he's doing out in Chicago, and just and that's what we hope. We hope that will go, as you say, with this talk, the word will get out that of Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead is making this commitment to this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. As my good friend Jacob in Chicago is bringing this in his EMS academy, that's how the message spreads, and that's how we get more folks in the field who have the right training to help. And I hope that there will be a case where that you will tell your audience that this training helped, and we actually located somebody who was trafficking or missing, and we got them back to their families. Because, as I said in my story, when so many of our Indigenous families come up to me and just tell me how lucky I am as a Native father, and I was like, I buried my daughter. How am I lucky? It's the worst thing in the world. But they say, but you know where your daughter is. And there's so many Indigenous families who are waiting years, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years with no answers. And you live with that on their shoulders every single day they wake up until the time, they call it a day. And your Native populations in Fargo, more West Fargo do it. In Chicago, Jacob's large urban Native population does the same thing. And so I never considered myself lucky, but to be another Indigenous family who has no answers. And just think, if we could get this word out more in our brothers and sisters in fire EMS, where they could get this training out to their department to say, yes, we do serve, tribal lands as an off-reservation agency. We do have a large urban Native population like Chicago does, like Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead does. And if we can sit there and say, hey, because of our commitment is hopefully we were able to help get a missing Indigenous person back home. And even one is an amazing story to tell, because it's about, we had the right tool to look for, just as much as Jacob does has in Chicago now.
All right. It's a great message, Monte.
Well,
Chief
it's
Dickman, do you have
about our
do you have a
teamwork.
closing? Yeah. Chief Dickman, do you have a closing kind of thought? And also,
I wanted something Matthew said really triggered a thought when you talk about the safety. And one of the things that we stress to our crews is really it's not engagement, it's knowing what you have and not tipping your hand. And if you can get someone to trust you and get this person to the hospital and then kind of off to the side, this, otherwise you wind up with standoffish people. You wind up with people that tend to try and be overprotective for obviously all the wrong reasons. But one of the things Monty just touched on, and I guess I can close with that, is our safety is important as well, and the safety of our crews. And recognizing something doesn't do you any good if you can't treat and transport that person and get them somewhere where they need to be. And what we teach our crews is treat it like you would any other call. Ask questions if you have the ability to do so in private, where there's not someone. If you hear someone, some of the simple things where someone's consistently answering the questions for them and things like that, don't tip yourself off. Simply respond with, "Okay, we understand. Let's get him over to the hospital, and this way you're safe. You have them in a place where we can now contact the resources or let the hospital know. Now you're in a much more controlled situation than our folks are out in the field." And hopefully, again, for Monty's daughter and Monty's family, hopefully we can have many more success stories.
right? Yeah, I think that's obviously one of the main goals. I think we'll promise you, Monty, that we'll continue to work in this metro area. Well, once again, we'll continue that promise, and we'll stay in touch with Chief Dickman and you, and gather all the information and share stuff that we can do, and try to get more people involved, maybe statewide, those kind of things, and maybe invite you to some other special occasions that you can have the opportunity to tell your guys' stories too. So that's kind of the goal.
Well, it's a good goal to have. And again, I just thank you so much for inviting, myself, but also a good friend, Jacob, to also be part of this. But also, again, I want to say, we say which means thank you in our Ojibwe language for your commitment from your metropolitan fire departments to ensure that, your area for West Fargo and Moorhead now have heard this. And we'll be continuing it. And I hope that all our brothers and sisters in fire and EMS and emergency management listening to this listening to your Tailboard Talk, will sit there and say, we want to do the same thing. We hear the message as Jacob has, and we want to provide this training to make sure that our fire and EMS personnel have that also. And for that, I'm forever grateful for you for doing that. So we wish thank again for your time and commitment and your leadership for all of you and Jacob out in Chicago. Again, this is a nationwide epidemic, and this is just 4 departments that have made this commitment. And we know across the United States, there are 580 federally recognized tribes, and there are large urban native populations. So I'm hoping this message goes out to many. So again, thank you so much, Miigwech.
Thank you, guys. And if you can hold on the line a minute, when we close up the show, we'd like to talk to you afterwards a little bit, if we could too. So the first step is awareness of what's going on in our communities, and awareness of those that are in need and what we can do to provide some help and get people back to their families. So we urge you, if you've heard this podcast and you're moved, explore some of those resources. If you've got tribal communities in your area, talk to the folks. If you haven't had relationships yet, people are very open to learning more about each other in our communities. And once you start those conversations, Our department and our police department has had conversations with other nationalities that are settled in our communities, and found that instead of being off-putting when you open the door to conversations, people are almost universally welcoming and happy to learn from each other and learn how you can address those needs. So in this case, reach out to your Native communities in the area and try to carry on this work and spread the word.
Absolutely. And then, like I said, a year ago, Monte was on and told his story about his daughter. Please go back and listen to that. It's
very powerful.
If you haven't heard it, it's a 2-part, 2 episodes.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
And good night from Tailboard Talk.
All right. Good night.
Have a safe one.
Welcome to Tailboard Talk with
Chris Rasmussen,
Craig Nelson, and Jeff Wallen. Every month we explore different topics of interest to you, our cohorts in fire and emergency services. So whether you sit back and listen, sound off on the message board, or call in live to be part of the conversation, we welcome you to join us in our mission to improve the fire service for those we serve and those we serve beside. Now coming to you live from the Great White North, this is Tailboard Talk on Fire Engineering Talk Radio.